I think they were just forgotten, to be honest. There was no one there that made enough fuss and enough noise to say, we're still here. And they were just forgotten. And just as time progressed, they were just there by themselves. And so there was no reinvestment of the city or the community back into it. As the older generation aged out and passed away, the younger generation just didn't invest back into it like their parents and their grandparents had.
Mm-hmm. Ready to rock and roll? Is that action? All right.
Okay. That's right. All right. Absolutely. Go.
Hello, everybody. It's Jason Will with
Go.
This is a real estate podcast, but we talk about leadership, personal growth, and becoming the best version of yourself. Leadership, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Growth, best version of yourself. Go. So this is a real estate podcast. I want to welcome my audience to the Impact Agent podcast. I want to thank everybody for your continued support. And just remind everybody that this is a free show. We're not sponsored by anybody. So if you are enjoying the information that you hear on the show, if you find it impactful, inspiring, motivational, please share it. Today we have some very special guests. We're going to take a long walk back into history today and bring some things to light that I think people need to know about, and a very worthy cause that I think our community can rally around in support of. I am joined by Chenel and Mrs. McCants. Will you ladies take a moment to introduce yourselves?
Yes, my name is Chenel Chapman, and I am one of the founders of the Plateau Magazine Point Community Redevelopment Corporation, which is a nonprofit that helps to revitalize the area of Magazine Point, Plateau, and any of the other surrounding areas.
Mrs. McCants?
I'm Valena McCants, an old teacher, product of Mobile County Training School, and it's my joy to be here today.
Thank you so much. And my lovely co-host?
Of course you know who I am. I'm Victoria Jones, and I'm very happy to be here. Good.
All right. First, we're going to give you kind of the context of everything and unfold this story, which is, what is this? How old is this story? It's over a century?
Oh, I believe so.
Yeah.
Because I was a student at Mobile County Training School in Plateau, AfricaTown. At the time, in high school, we all heard about the Clotilda. We heard about Cudjo Lewis. And AfricaTown is a name that came along afterwards, but everybody that went to school out there knew about Cudjo Lewis, who was on the last slave ship. It was famous for that. And then we learned much from the community people, because at that time there were any number of the descendants of the Africans, direct descendants. Lately, I don't know if there are many around, because at my age, I'm 94, and you see some of these people were along with me and have since passed on. So much has been talked about the revitalization and what they would want if the Clotilda was ever found. And you see, the Clotilda was just found in May.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everything I can tell you is really just visual. And at the time when I first went to Plateau, it was populated and had old, beautiful homes. They were well kept. And you see, you don't find too many homes out there now. And that's one of the reasons to bus in children. There are little or no children in Plateau.
Wow. Well, let's tell the audience, first of all, who you are and just let everybody know like what your personal history is with AfricaTown.
So my life has been spent in that total area. My working life was spent at Mobile County Training School. And then when desegregation came along, many of the teachers from there went to Viga. So in my last years, I worked at Viga High School. It was frightening to all of us who went over to Viga because we had walked by Viga many years. All the children that came to Mobile County Training School had to pass Viga to get to Mobile County Training School. At the time, many of our students came from up the road, Saraland, Mount Vernon, Whistler. The school was fed, and they walked. They walked from Pritchard over to Mobile County Training School. And even when I began, I must have been 13 or 14, and I left home with my father. We caught the first bus of the first streetcar that came, and then he would get off downtown, and I would keep on to Lafayette and Davis Avenue, and I would catch another bus. In later years, where GM&O is now, I would go there and catch the bus. We had moved really up. We didn't have to go way to Pritchard then. So you see, most of my life was in that area, and I have a fondness for it even in these last days. And I'm sure this is why Chenel asked me to be a part of this. I taught Chenel's father.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, I taught her father.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, I taught her father. At that time, I was noted for walking and finding where the children lived. And that's how I know the whole area very well. Plateau, Magazine Point, Pritchard, all that area. Because in my training as a teacher, I learned much that I had to make contact with the families in order to teach the whole child. And so I did. And I loved it.
Oh, wow. That's a really powerful point. All right, Chenel, is the goal of this project to focus on the school itself? Is the goal to make the school, to revitalize the school so that people move back? What is the goal of the project?
The goal is to revitalize the entire community, to bring in affordable housing, to bring in a store, because it is a food desert, to bring in possibly a place for kids to have access to the internet and a communication center, just to allow people to have access to mail drop-off without having to go all the way back in town, to have access to basic needs.
Yeah, healthcare. So food desert means there's no
place
supermarket
there in the area for them to even buy. There's not even a convenience store. So there's nowhere in the area for them to even buy a bag of sugar. So there just needs to be focus on the community to help bring those things, those basic needs, those things that we, myself included, take for granted because we live so close to all of these things. I probably have 5 grocery stores by my house that I could go to in a matter of 2 minutes.
Right.
And it would take them at least 15 to 20 to get to one.
Well, and we want to talk about, obviously, the historical significance of AfricaTown and why it's so worthy of a revitalization. In order to get to that and to really paint the picture for the audience, we got to start with the Clotilda and tell that story because there's so many fascinating aspects of it, Mrs. McCants, that I want you to touch on, from stories that you've heard of the journey, stories that you've heard of any scandal or suppression of the truth. And because you're talking about this, the ship, the last slave ship to come to the United States, and it sank in Mobile Bay, but it was just recently found, like you said. And until then, there's been a great denial about it. So tell us what you have heard about, starting with the journey and just the conditions on the ship and how deplorable they were. But you see, like in the pictures of the ship, for example.
Oh, yeah.
You will see that, or it's my understanding, that they would be stacked on top of each other.
Oh, yeah, because they wanted to get more people, as many of the slaves over here as possible. But I always heard that story. Cudjo Lewis is the only one that told that story and lived near the road where you would go. I've also heard, they're not that young now, but I have heard Cleon Jones. Mm-hmm. He would tell you that he used to fish in that area where the ship is. Said it was good for fishing. And I guess there were other boys, who could tell the same story. But I don't think Cleon is a baby now. He just went up for the 50th anniversary of the Mets. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And I taught him.
What can you tell me about how AfricaTown was started?
Well, where the ship is, I guess when they got off the ship, they just found land, and that was land across the highway. So that's where you see all the churches. There's 3 Baptist churches right on the highway. All of them have some kind of connection to Cudjo Lewis. Yorktown Baptist, Union Baptist, Hopewell, all of them. But over on the side by the school, there were a lot of people who evidently came off that ship. I remember names like the Floyds, Floyd, and they were all very smart. All of us were very neat and clean at that time, starched iron, and some of those areas where the people lived, it was just like they would take a plot of land and build a house. There were no streets, and for a long time, streets were not paved in Plateau. I guess in the last 20 years, they got sidewalks or streets. Now, when I was a girl going to school out there, International Paper Company was the main industry. It made paper, that. Mm-hmm. Now, that road, Paper Mill Road, is just used for trucks. Not too many people go up and down there because Scott Paper Company went in, you see. Mm-hmm. And that's when really Plateau began to disintegrate. But it was flourishing over on the side by International Paper Company. And even as I foresaid, when I went to school there, the bus couldn't come down to the school per se because it was a big hill. And see, when it rained, we had boots at school and you had boots at home because you didn't know how you were going to slide down that red hill. It was just like that red clay. And so over on that side, where the school, it was evidently rich soil, and everybody had a garden, and cabbage, corn, watermelons. All of those families have died that had a connection, that had beautiful gardens. They don't have those gardens anymore. And from what I gather from the State Department, I have heard the story that was some of the best soil. Rich, you didn't even fertilize it. They didn't know anything about fertilizing anything. But everybody had a plot, and they kept it. Now, there are a few homes still over on that side. They're very nice. Back in there where a lot of them lived, there were no streets. And as Chenel has said, there's not a store now where they can go to.
Why do you think, Chenel? Why do you think there was never any investment in, any commercial spaces to provide services to people in the community there?
I think they were just forgotten, to be honest. There was no one there that made enough fuss and enough noise to say, we're still here. And they were just forgotten. And just as time progressed, they were more and more forgotten, and they were just there by themselves. And so there was no reinvestment of the city or the community back into it. As the older generation aged out and passed away, the younger generation just didn't invest back into it like their parents and their grandparents had.
Mm-hmm. And aside from that, because there was nothing to hold or keep the young people who graduated, when these young people received their diplomas, that was a ticket to get away. And you would be surprised where some of them went and became excellent business people. Philadelphia was one of the areas. Chicago. The flight was just to get away where they could see something. Sometimes when some of them call me and say, how are you doing, or happy birthday, I want to come and visit, and what happened to Plateau? And they're big people living in Georgia and everywhere. And I get mad with them, and I said, you had 9 children. Did you bring them back? No, you raised them all in Chicago, or you raised them in Georgia. And I think if Chenel did research, and she would be doing a yeoman's job, if she could just find the sites where these young people have gone. I taught a young man who finished Mobile County Training School, went to Alco and started working. He was a brilliant young man, and I didn't like it because I didn't like his lifestyle. You see, that's one of the reasons that many of them would resort to drinking, going to the Elks, because that was the only outlet. You couldn't hardly get to Mobile. And I guess I just stayed behind him so much, and his grandmother was living. They've torn down the houses across from Hubbard's store, where a lot of people live. And you know, I raised so much sand with him. He went to Dillard, graduated, and I bet you don't know where he went to finish his graduate school. He went to the same school where Donald Trump. He's a graduate of the Wharton School of Finance. He lives in Milwaukee. You see, and I could just tell you so many stories.
What do you think's been your proudest moment so far? Is it just the children and how
when they come back and I see them, or I meet them at the store, and
right, I can see that.
Because teachers didn't make any money. You see, when I started, it was $900 a year, and I had a degree.
Wow.
I would bring children to my home, and if I had whatever I had, we shared it. And I guess, you know, maybe I taught them a better way to live.
Right.
And I didn't mind them using whatever I had.
It sounds like you definitely had an amazing effect on the children.
And I'm proud of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud of the ones who stayed here. And as I have said, many, they couldn't move back to Plateau, for instance, but somebody else who is just like them would move back to Plateau, because these young people have another kind of life, a lot of them. The lowest ones have tried to elevate themselves. And I can't blame them. Everybody wants upward mobility. Yeah, it just so happens that I stay in the same area where I grew up. But I was born in Chicago. And my father was an artisan, and a good one. And that's how I was born in Chicago. And at the time when I was born, you see, midwives were famous out in Plateau. It wasn't a child hardly. And it wasn't a child born in a hospital in Plateau. The Schambergers were famous midwives. And so many of the living people would tell you who delivered them. All of my children were meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I understand that.
Well, I want to encourage our listeners and anybody that gets exposed to this show to do some research on this story to figure, to get some more backstory and kind of put some of the pieces of the story together. But my understanding from the limited research that I've done is that when this was before emancipation, so we're pre-emancipation. So a number of these folks that were on the Clotilda were sold. Taken to different parts of the country. Some were divided here locally, and they were brought to different plantations. And then after the emancipation, they came back to AfricaTown and to start, acquiring plots of land and settling there. I'm assuming just because there was sentimental value, because that's where they exited the ship. I mean, that's where they stepped foot when they got off, right? Is that right? So, but it's fascinating that they were able to form this community, because it talks about in the history of the story about how they were able to establish their own school, establish their own laws, to really build a self-sustaining community. So that part is super fascinating. But I think it's important to point out that you will hear people say when we talk about slavery and emancipation and segregation or, desegregation and all these things, it's like, and it's noted in the podcast that I listened to and researched for this show that, these, the folks that got off this ship who were taken, illegally from their homes, they were, hunted down, captured by Africans, sold to white men in the slave trade, brought here against their will. But you hear people say, why don't you just go back? Like, go back to Africa. You've heard people say that. Well, they wanted to go back. They just couldn't afford to go back. And so what they did was they dug in their heels and developed a self-sustaining community in probably, I would say, a very difficult part of the country to do so. So they faced persecution. There's a lot of atrocities against them, in addition to hate speech and all these other things. So you have all these things going on, but yet the community survives, for over a century. And here you are trying to revitalize the community and bring it back because it has such a strong historical significance. So, Chenel, how long has this project been going on, the revitalization project?
We started it probably about a year and a half ago, as just really a conversation after my uncle passed away. When I would come and take him to treatment and things, we would stop at the Family Dollar on Broad Street. And he would say, "Niece, I need to go by the store because there's no place for me to buy anything once I get home." And so, it was not until after he passed away that really resonated with me, because if that was the case for him, that was the case for a lot of other people that still lived there that may not have had somebody to come and get them and take them where they needed to go. And so from that, I spoke with my dad, and that's kind of how this whole conversation began, was from my uncle.
If I'm hearing Mrs. McCants correctly, there have been a great many of her students and people of the community who have left and gone on to accomplish great things. Doctors, lawyers, go to Ivy League schools, all these things. But I hear sense some frustration. And I'm wondering if you're feeling it too. Are you having any issue getting some of these people to get involved in the revitalization? Some of these people that have big names, big accomplishments that could really help this, help you guys get further and help it go faster.
I have, but I have just since decided that I'm going to focus on what I can do. And if at this point they'd like to join in, that would be great. And if not, then I'll move on and try to find someone else. I would love to have us all join together, because there are several organizations in the community. But at this point, I think something is important to everyone else. Everyone else has a different importance, a different thing of importance. And so mine right now is the food desert and the affordable housing. And so at this point, that is why I'm just going to put it out there. And if people would join, that'd be great.
Have you found a champion yet? Have you found somebody that's really said, I'm going to be a consistent voice to support you in the community?
My biggest champion has been my dad.
Really?
And Ms. McCants, once I brought her in, yes.
But you haven't had a big political name or city councilman or congressman or anybody say, this is a great thing.
No.
This is, it's difficult for me to sit here and pontificate on this, but here's what I see, okay, is that we talk about that, we should talk about the fact that we're all immigrants in one way or the other, unless you do your 23andMe and find out you got a lot of a Native American in you. We're all immigrants. And from these immigrant stories is great, like, triumph. I mean, of the human spirit and the human will. And there's a lot of inspiration that can be found in that. And what's more of an inspirational story than of the Clotilda, just the circumstances. We could talk for an hour about just how this all came about and how it was basically a bet, and just, how jovial it all started out. And then, just the severity of the conditions on the boat, and then what these people had to do just to survive, just to meet primal needs, but then to go on and build a community that's, had so many disadvantages, but yet they were able to overcome on such a high level and sustain, a really good life there, the schools and all that stuff. So to me, just the pride factor maybe is what I'm looking for, that these people could reach on and go, this is where I'm from. This is where my family's from. This is the story of, how we overcame.
Well, many times I ask the same questions. When they're telling me what they have accomplished, her uncle has done great things in Pennsylvania. He was one of my first students to me. But you see, they come back at Mardi Gras.
Right.
And that's not the time to talk business. Mm-hmm. They having fun.
Right.
They have that. They choose their own spots. They know. Mm-hmm. They know Government Street. And you do have some. I'm thinking of one you ought to put your fingers on, Chenel. They boast about being millionaires. They boast about all of the property that they have. And one of the ones who was an accomplished real estate person, he's out by the golf course someplace. Again, you have young people with great minds, but they talk. That's all. And that's why I have always admired Chenel's daddy, because he did have a little store. It was another man, and I would hope that Chenel would establish a store. He was a graduate, Hubbard's store. And I would hope, and I tell her, you got to have a beginning point, and you really need a store. And there are some nice homes in Plateau, but there are a lot of empty lots. And people are not coming back to empty lots. But if you can have something where they can go for health care, if you can have some place where they could get a loaf of bread, you see. I think our city leaders let us down. I really think so. Some of them don't know where Plateau is. The only one that tried to put sidewalks in some parts was William Carroll, but he didn't last long. So you see, if when they come out to talk, yes, they will go to the only decent place to have a meeting, and that's at the Hope Center. Reverend Hope, and all of his sons were outstanding. Yeah, I think if you get them all together, you might could do something.
I have a question for both you and Chenel. What do y'all think is the most important thing that people should know about AfricaTown?
That there's hope there. That there are people there who love it and who want to remain there, and that deserve the opportunity to stay there if they choose to, and be able to educate their kids, have a store, have a healthcare facility. And there's a lot of pride and joy there, and a lot of potential there.
Yeah.
The people there are wonderful, wonderful people. And they love family and they love the community. And they just need help to bring back what they love. And so that's one of the other reasons why I am so, I so want to help to revitalize it.
I know, it blows my mind how long any of this has taken to even come up, honestly.
Yeah.
To get to this point.
Who would be a great person for you to connect to? Would it be somebody, a developer who's interested or looking for an affordable housing project? Is it a politician who is going to provide a grant for affordable housing? Is it reconnecting with descendants, like Ms. McCants said, who have amassed great wealth, and, you would think they would want to come back to support this initiative, or are you looking for like all the above?
All of the above. Yeah. Because it will take everyone from everywhere to bring it back. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a one person or one group undertaking.
Right.
And, we speak of One Mobile, that is still part of Mobile. Levon Manzi is our council person out there. So it is part of Mobile. And so if we have one Mobile, we shouldn't forget about any parts of Mobile.
It's such a incredible story, that, like I said, is just so inspirational and so unique to Mobile. And just, it's like a living museum of sorts, that should be preserved and invested in, and especially if there are members of the community, like you said, that it's still a joyful place. They still love it. They want to be there. There's people that maybe want to come back once you guys are able to establish some services and basic human needs like stores and things like that. So it's truly, truly fascinating. But any parting thoughts, Chenel, that you want to let people know?
I would just like people to know that there is hope out there, and that there is a place for anyone who wants to help. There's a school out there, Mobile County Training School, that is a wonderful place. Wonderful, wonderful place.
Is there actually somewhere that like people in the audience can go to find out more about this, or maybe even take part?
In
like a website? Yeah.
I'm building my website now.
Okay, great.
Okay, perfect.
But you can give them my personal email, and I can hopefully answer any questions that they have.
Yeah, we can put that in the notes.
And but that's where it will start too, is with the children. There are kids out there who deserve the type of education any other kid in Mobile County has the possibility to get. Mm-hmm. And they're tucked back there in the corner, and they too are forgotten about. There are things that they could be introduced to that other schools have, like the broadcasting at Phillips, and just other programs and things that could be brought there too, to introduce them to various things and possibilities. And just the education of the school, of the students at the school, is, I think, very important, because that would help to educate other people and
it is,
and bring more people back into the school.
Yeah.
Because the number of students at the school has declined, because the number of people in the community have declined. And so if you bring in the affordable housing, and you bring in the food from the grocery store, and you bring in a little basic medicine place or medical facility for them, more people will come back, more students will come back, and you can have what it once was.
How at risk is like the school? Is the decline getting so rampant that it's getting very, very serious, or where are we at?
Yes, it's less than 180 students that attend the school at this time.
Do you recall a number of like in its prime where it was in terms of student count?
See, it was a grade school and going to high school, maybe 1,200.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's only a middle school, so...
See, it's a middle school, and they are bused. See, again, the children have no concept of what Plateau is all about because they're young. They come from up in Chickasaw. They bus, housing, they bus there. All they do is get on the bus, get off the bus, you see. Now, to piggyback on what she's saying about opportunities, I had the pleasure of hosting some of the people who were here with the Clotilda from Smithsonian. Twice they came to my home. And I can't think of his name because it's a different name. That's the diver.
The diver that went down and found the ship.
He is volunteering his services to come back here to teach at the, some classes at the middle school, underwater diving. Mm-hmm. But the first thing you got to know, you got to swim. You got to know how to swim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the pool out there went for years not usable. This year, I think it is. Well, you can't teach upscale swimming just, overnight.
Right.
Well, you got to get the swimmers ready. You got a lot, but he's willing to do that. He's fascinated by coming back. But it's the people away that will do more for you than all of these names that I'm calling. There's only one out there in Plateau who's trying to restore some of the yards. And that's Cleon Jones. And that's why they go to him, that is, publicly, when some of the people want to interview somebody. Well, you see, he's the only one from Plateau who still lives in Plateau.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And I think every day that he is in town, he's got a crew trying to clean a yard or do something of that sort. So you see, Chenel has a big order.
Yeah. She's got her work cut out for her big time.
It sounds like a project with lots of mini projects branching out because it's a lot.
Yeah. It is. And you kind of just have to take one section at a time.
Yeah.
And the first place to start for us is with the food.
And honestly, different sections, different projects, certain people be more passionate about certain things.
And so that's why I just go on along. And, when people, they interview me for this, I go on along with it,
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not from Plateau, and yet I do have a passion for it. Because I remember when it was a vibrant area. Not only the gardens, but the mines and the way they kept their homes. Just everything. And you see, when the older people die, then the young people tow down the houses. And that's everywhere. Mm-hmm. They don't want to do anything.
Right.
See, they just I told you they just come back for Mardi Gras. They come back for the class reunions. And all that's good time.
It's fascinating.
So what's going to be next for you besides the website and just...
We recently acquired a piece of property that we are looking to actually put the store on. So, like I said, that will be our very first undertaking is the store.
And will this be like a for-profit business, the store?
Yes.
It will. And do you have somebody that's interested in
financing.
Yeah, and running it and doing all that stuff?
No.
So you're just basically looking, you're going to say, hey, we've got this piece of land here. Come on, come get it type thing.
Well, not necessarily. There is some financing that we can do. And if they want to come alongside and make it bigger and better, then that'd be great. But it's got to start somewhere. It's got to start small. I mean, it's going to start small, but it's got to just start somewhere.
Yeah, no, you're setting a platform for somebody to come step in and do something about.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
because I think that there are a lot of even mom and pop grocery stores that we could partner with that would help or could help and come alongside and bring in some stuff and get it out there to them.
Well, the cool thing is that you know, this mom and pop thing is just, it's fading just as rapidly as everything else. But it's so quaint, you know, and you've got these old quintessential stores that people they're just are a memory these days. But there's an opportunity there, this old school kind of, you know, quaint opportunity that exists because somebody could have been like, you know, a mom and pop could be listening. Somebody that owned a mom and pop store being like, you know, I was forced out of business by Publix, but now I have this opportunity to come back. But I think for many of these people, the path back is obviously math. And so they need to hear that if they make this investment, that people are not only going to shop there, but they're gonna move back and want to invest in the area. Do you have some research or anything firm and concrete that says, hey, if you build it, they will come? Or is it just an idea?
Well, there are a lot of people who are in other areas that live in affordable housing that would love to move back and could take their vouchers and use their vouchers to come back and move back into the area. We've actually acquired 4 or 5 properties already that we are looking to also build houses on. There'll be probably 2-1 or 3-1, 12 to 1,500 square feet, and just kind of small enough for a family of 4 maybe. But it's something there that they can come back to, that they could use their voucher for to come back, whose kid goes to
the school,
Mobile
already.
County Training School, right? And the only reason why they live somewhere else is because there was no housing there. They could use that same voucher, come live in the community, and their kid could walk to school instead of them trying to have to ride the bus or come down. So,
well, one question I have is that the school at one point accommodated roughly 1,200 students. Is it still in a condition to where if it started to grow in student population that it is viable to do so? Or is money needed to revitalize the school as well?
The building is in good shape. They've done some,
they have a gym there,
they've done some up improvements on there. The buildings can be, you know, a little renovation, but it's you can go to school there, but it's just a matter of leadership.
Because you have the capacity. Right. I mean, you have the land.
Yeah.
You have the land for commercial use. You have the land for residential use. The proof in the numbers was there. 1,200 students, 1,200 families. I mean, it's there. You know, they just need a reason to come back. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. This has been awesome. I really hope that we can kind of keep working on this together and provide updates and really support you guys. I know that Travis Middleton is going to go do some video work and kind of give people a visual of what the community looks like now, so that we'll have this audio, but we'll also have some visual, examples to show them of, some of the things you described today. And I just hope it reaches some of the right people. But, I would love to reach out to the Smithsonian and dive deeper from their perspective. And it's just a fascinating story. So I'm grateful you guys made the time to come visit us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving us a voice.
I've enjoyed you.
Yeah, you're awesome. And you're so welcome. And as soon as we have the website, we will share it. And if anybody wants to get in touch with Chenel or Mrs. McCants by way of Chenel, that will provide that email address that you so generously offered to provide. So, ladies, until we meet again. Thanks for listening to the Impact Agent Podcast. If you like the show and got something out of it, please like the Impact Agent Podcast on Facebook and rate and review the show on iTunes or anywhere you listen to podcasts. This really helps us grow the show and helps other agents find it. Please share it with your friends and coworkers as well. Want us to deliver the show to you via email every week? Then email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com and we'll send you the show every week. Please let us know what you think about the show, what you like, what you don't, or possibly make a suggestion about a topic you want to hear. Email me at jason@impactagentuniversity.com or leave us a message on Facebook at Impact Agent Podcast. Until next week, everybody be productive, safe, and happy, and always keep learning. This podcast is produced by Johnny Gwynn at Deep Fried Studios in Mobile, Alabama, and is paid for and powered by ImpactAgentUniversity.com.